I was still holding my badge when the door to HR opened. Karen Whitfield, Director of Human Resources at Meridian Solutions, had the kind of face that practiced careful neutrality for a living. But when I walked in on that Tuesday morning, badge in hand, ready to swipe into the payroll system the way I'd done every day for 3 years, something in her expression told me to sit down before I even asked the question. She slid a sheet of paper across the desk. It was a resignation letter. My name was at the top. I read it twice before I looked up. "This was submitted yesterday afternoon," Karen said. "Carefully. On your behalf. By your father." I didn't say anything for a moment. The paper was still warm from the printer. Someone had typed my name and my position, Senior Payroll Coordinator, and the phrase "effective immediately" and a reason, to pursue a family business opportunity full-time. My father's name was in the CC line. He'd sent it to Karen. To the company's main HR inbox. To my direct supervisor, Lee. To Marcus Hill, head of operations. I set the paper back on the desk. "I didn't resign," I said. Karen looked relieved that I'd said it out loud. "I didn't think so," she said quietly. "But we needed to hear that from you." That was the moment. That was when I understood exactly what my father had done. He hadn't asked. He hadn't threatened. He hadn't given me an ultimatum with a deadline attached. He had simply decided for me. And he had told my boss. What happened in the 9 days after that, what unraveled, what rang, what came through in a voicemail I've kept saved on my phone ever since, he still doesn't fully understand. But I do. And I've needed to tell this for a long time. Let me tell you about my father's business before I tell you what he did, because you need to understand what he was actually asking me to give up and what I'd already been giving him for free. My father, Dennis Caldwell, started Caldwell Heating and Air in 2007. HVAC contracting. Southeast Ohio. He built it from 2 service vans and a rented storage unit into a real operation with a commercial client roster, 6 technicians on payroll, and a reputation in 3 counties. He built it with his hands and his stubbornness and, eventually, with my invisible labor, though that last part took me a long time to name out loud. I'm the oldest of 3. My brother Cole is 2 years behind me. My sister Tara is 6 years younger. The dynamic was settled early. Cole was the one who'd eventually run the field side of the business. Tara was the baby. I was the responsible one, which is another way of saying I was the one nobody worried about because I'd figure it out. When Dad hired his first 2 employees in 2011, he didn't know how to run payroll. I was 15. I sat with him at the kitchen table with a legal pad and figured it out. When he landed his first commercial contract in 2013 and needed to invoice properly, I built him a system in Excel. When the business grew to 6 employees in 2016 and he needed actual accounting software, I set up QuickBooks, migrated 3 years of data, and trained myself to use it because he didn't want to pay a consultant. I was 20. I was working part-time at a hotel front desk and taking community college classes at night. I did it on Saturday mornings for free because he was my father and he needed help, and that is what you do. When I graduated with my accounting degree in 2019 and got a real job, a salaried position at Meridian Solutions, processing payroll and managing compliance for 140 employees, my father took it as confirmation that I was now officially qualified to manage his books. Not professionally. Not paid. Just qualified enough to be expected to. For 4 years, 2019 through early 2024, I managed the back end of Caldwell Heating and Air in addition to my full-time job. Every Friday evening, I logged into his QuickBooks remotely. I reconciled the week's transactions. I flagged vendor invoices that needed payment. I ran payroll every 2 weeks for 6 technicians. I filed the quarterly 941s with the IRS and the state withholding returns. I handled the year-end W-2s. I maintained his business insurance documentation and corresponded with the broker when there were questions about claims. My father paid his newest field hire $22 an hour. He paid me nothing. When I brought it up once the summer of 2021, I remember because it was the week after the 4th he gave me a look that settled the conversation before it started. "You're going to inherit this business someday," he said. "You're building something for yourself." That was his answer. Not "thank you." Not "let me make this right." "You're building something for yourself." I should have pushed harder. What I did instead was get better at my job. By 2022, I had my CPP certification, certified payroll professional. By early 2023, I was managing compliance for a company 3 times the size of Meridian. Job offers were starting to come in. I was building a real career, the kind that had a direction and a ceiling that kept moving up. Cole, for his part, handled the operational side of Dad's business well. Scheduling technicians, meeting clients, pulling permits. He was good at the hands-on stuff. But he didn't touch paperwork. He'd never learned QuickBooks. He called me when an invoice looked wrong or a technician had a withholding question. He called me because I always answered. The first time I really understood how deep the dependency had gotten was March of 2023. I was in a performance review at Meridian. Lee was telling me I was being considered for a senior role, a promotion to payroll manager, a $14,000 raise, and my phone buzzed 6 times in 40 minutes. Dad. Cole. Dad. Dad. Cole. Dad. I let them go to voicemail. But I felt the weight of them sitting there for the rest of that meeting. I got the promotion. I called my father on the drive home. He asked me what took so long to call back. I said I was in a meeting. He said, "I need you to look at the February state return." The accountant flagged something. He didn't have an accountant. He meant me. The pressure shifted in the fall of 2023. Subtly at first. The way it always does. Dad started using the phrase "the plan" when he talked about my future at the business. Not if. The plan. As in, the plan for when I came on full-time. He'd bring it up at family dinners, on the phone when I called to check in text messages that I'd read once and then set my phone face down. "When you come on board full-time, we'll set up a real office. Maybe even hire an assistant for you. When you're handling the back end, Cole can focus entirely on the field. The business needs someone like you in-house. We've grown past what I can manage with contractors." I said the same things every time. I have a career. I have a job that's going somewhere. I'm not leaving a salaried position with benefits to work without a contract. He heard none of it. In February of 2024, he called with something concrete. He wanted me to come on officially, title of Operations Manager, managing all finance and compliance for the business. He had a number, $48,000 a year. I made $78,000 at Meridian. Plus benefits, a retirement match, paid leave, and a clear path forward. I told him I appreciated the offer, but no. Not at that number, not without a formal agreement, and honestly, not at all. My career was pointed in a specific direction. I didn't want to step off that path. His voice went quiet in the way it did when he wasn't angry yet but was deciding whether to get there. "I'm not asking you to sacrifice anything," he said. "I'm asking you to invest in your family's future." "I'm investing in my own future, Dad." A pause. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "Right," he said. "And then, I'll figure something else out." That sentence scared me more than any argument would have. I kept doing the remote work anyway. Because stopping felt cruel. Because I told myself if I just kept contributing quietly, the pressure would ease. It didn't. In August, he hired a part-time bookkeeper named Phyllis from a local service. I was relieved. Maybe this was the transition. Maybe I could finally start stepping back gradually. Phyllis lasted 6 weeks. She couldn't make sense of the QuickBooks file because I had built the chart of accounts from scratch, and the structure only made sense with context she didn't have and I'd never written down. She quit in October. Dad called me that night. She couldn't handle it. You're going to need to take it back until I find someone. I said okay. That was my mistake. I kept saying okay. By January of 2024, something had changed in how he talked to me. He'd stopped framing things as requests. He'd shifted to something that sounded more like announcements. I'm planning for you to start full-time in March. You'll need to give notice by mid-February if you want to wrap things up cleanly. Cole needs you handling the compliance piece by the 1st of Q2. I corrected each one directly. I'm not leaving Meridian. March isn't happening. I've told you this. He'd say and move on to something else. Like I'd said something small and still negotiable. Like I'd said I wasn't sure about a restaurant. The week before everything happened, he called on a Sunday evening. I was meal prepping for the week. He asked me to walk him through the Q4 close because the numbers weren't reconciling. I walked him through it for 45 minutes. At the end of the call, he said, I'm going to reach out to your boss this week. I set the knife down. What does that mean? Just to coordinate the transition. If you're not going to initiate your own notice, someone needs to move things along. There is no transition, Dad. I have told you that. Sweetheart, I've already drafted the email. Do not send that email. Get some rest. We'll talk soon. He hung up before I could say anything else. I called back immediately. It went to voicemail. I sent a text, Dad, do not contact my employer. That is my job and my career and you do not have the right. I'm serious. He didn't reply that night. I told myself he wouldn't actually go through with it. That even he understood there were certain lines. I was wrong about that. Tuesday morning. 8:12 a.m. I drove to Meridian Solutions the way I did every day. Parked in the same spot, second row. Grabbed my badge from the cup holder. Walked in through the main entrance. The badge reader beeped red. I tried it again. Red. I stood there for a moment. Assumed it was a glitch. Went to the reception desk and asked Angie if she could buzz me through. She looked at her computer screen. Her expression shifted, just slightly, just enough. Karen asked to see you first, Angie said carefully. She's on the 3rd floor. Karen Whitfield's office. I'd been there exactly twice in 3 years, once for onboarding, once for a payroll discrepancy that needed escalation. It had never been about me. Karen was standing when I walked in. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. On the corner of the desk, turned to face me, was a single sheet of paper. She sat. I sat. She slid the paper forward. I read it. Resignation letter. My full legal name. My job title. Effective immediately. Date, yesterday. Monday. Submitted at 4:17 p.m. Sent from my father's personal email address. To Karen. To Lee. To Marcus. To the general HR inbox. The body of the letter said, please accept this notice of resignation on behalf of my daughter. She has accepted a full-time role managing operations at our family business, Caldwell Heating and Air, effective immediately. She has asked me to handle the transition communication as she is currently overwhelmed. Please feel free to reach out with any questions. His email. His name. His words. My career. Karen watched me read it a second time. I take it, she said, this wasn't submitted with your knowledge. No. I set the paper down. I told him specifically not to contact anyone here. She nodded carefully. He called yesterday around 4. He spoke to Lee first. Said you'd been overwhelmed and had asked him to handle the paperwork because you were too emotional to do it yourself. I looked at her steadily. His words, she said. Too emotional to handle it myself. I breathed through my nose once. He also told Lee, Karen continued, that you'd been struggling with your performance lately. That you'd wanted to leave for some time but hadn't known how to bring it up. There it was. He hadn't just said I was leaving. He'd built a case for why I'd be no loss. He'd made me look like someone they'd already been carrying. Lee had flagged Karen, who had put my access on hold pending a direct conversation with me. Because and Karen said this gently, my father had been specific. He'd known my job title. He'd known Lee's name. He'd known I handled quarterly compliance filings. He'd known enough that it had registered as credible for a few hours. I didn't resign, I said again. I have no intention of resigning. I'd like to formally document that this submission was made without my consent, without my authorization, and without any legal right to act on my behalf. Karen was already opening a form on her computer. We spent 40 minutes on it. My access was restored by 9:30. Lee sent me a brief email. Glad to hear this is a misunderstanding. Let's connect when you're ready. And Karen logged the incident in my file as third-party interference, initiated externally. On paper, everything was corrected by 10 a.m. I went back to my desk. Opened my computer. Pulled up the quarterly compliance calendar because I had work to do. But for the first 11 minutes I just sat there and looked at the screen without seeing it. I thought about the word he'd chosen. Overwhelmed. That I was too emotional to manage my own resignation. My father had known exactly what he was doing. He hadn't sent something obviously fraudulent. He'd sent something textured enough to be believed for a few hours, something with my job title, my supervisor's name, specific enough. Details to give it weight. He'd timed it for a Monday afternoon. He'd dressed the whole thing in concern, like a father helping a struggling daughter navigate something difficult. He'd been planning it. I've already drafted the email. He had. On my desktop was a folder labeled Caldwell HNA Admin. 4 years of work inside it. QuickBooks exports going back to 2019. Every quarterly filing. Every vendor contact. Payroll registers for 6 technicians. Insurance documentation. The login credentials for every system the business ran on the payroll software, the state tax portal, the vendor invoice platform, because I was the only person who had ever set any of them up and the only person who had ever logged in. I looked at that folder for a moment. Then I moved it off the desktop. Didn't delete it. Didn't change anything inside it. Just moved it somewhere I'd have to choose to open. Then I opened a new browser tab and looked up the IRS quarterly 941 filing deadline. April 30th, 12 weeks away. I texted my father, do not contact anyone at my employer again. Not Karen. Not Lee. Not anyone. If you do, I will pursue legal action for employment interference. I mean that. He replied 4 hours later. You're being dramatic. We'll talk when you calm down. I read it. Didn't reply. And then I waited. Because I knew in the specific, detailed way that only comes from 4 years of holding something together that nobody else understood what was coming. I just didn't know it would take exactly 9 days. The Wednesday after it happened, I woke up at 6:14 a.m. the way I always do, made coffee the way I always do, and drove to work. That was the whole of my rebellion. I just kept going. I didn't call him back. I didn't text. I didn't log into QuickBooks that Friday evening the way I had done every single Friday evening for 4 years. I just didn't open the app. I made dinner instead. Watched something on television I can't even remember now. Went to bed at a reasonable hour. It sounds small. It didn't feel small. For 4 years, my Friday evenings had belonged to Caldwell Heating and Air before they belonged to me. I would get home from a full week of managing payroll compliance for 140 people, and then I would sit down and manage payroll compliance for 6 more. Unpaid. Without a title. Without a thank you that ever felt like it meant anything. The first Friday I didn't do it, I sat on my couch at 7 p.m. and waited to feel guilty. I didn't. I felt something closer to the specific relief of setting down something heavy you've been carrying so long you forgot it wasn't part of your body. My phone had been ringing since Tuesday. Dad twice that first day, then silence Wednesday and Thursday, the silence that meant he was waiting for me to crack and call first. Cole on Thursday afternoon, one call, no voicemail. My sister Tara sent a text on Thursday evening that said, "Hey, haven't heard from you, you okay?" Which told me Dad had started working the family phone tree. I told Tara I was fine and that there was some family stuff going on and I'd call her soon. I didn't call that week. At work, Lee stopped by my desk on Wednesday morning. She looked uncomfortable in the way people do when they've been used as a tool without knowing it and are trying to figure out how to address that. "I want you to know," she said, "that I didn't fully believe it. I just didn't know how not to act on it." "I know," I said. He was specific enough. He knew my name. He's heard me say it 100 times. I paused. He pays attention to the things he thinks he can use. Lee looked at me for a moment. "Are you okay?" I thought about the honest answer to that question. The honest answer was that I wasn't entirely sure what I felt, not devastated exactly, not furious exactly, but something quieter and more certain than either. Like something that had been held at an angle for years had finally been set down flat. "Yeah," I said. "I think I actually am." On Friday afternoon, I called my friend Danny. We'd been close since college. She worked in HR at a hospital system across town. I told her the whole story over the phone while I cooked, which is how I tell stories I'm still processing. Moving my hands helps. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "How long has he been doing the books thing?" she asked. 4 years. 4 years of free labor. Every Friday. Plus quarterly filings. Year-end W-2s. Insurance renewals. And when he wanted you to formalize it, he offered you $48,000. For a job I was already doing for free. Another pause. "And then when you said no," Danny said slowly, "he tried to have you fired from your actual job to force the issue." "He tried to resign me," I said. "He genuinely thought that if I didn't have a choice, I'd just come home and take over the books." "And then what?" Danny said. "He thought you'd just not be upset about it?" "I think," I said, and I had to stop and consider this carefully, "I think he genuinely believed I would be relieved. That I was only staying at Meridian out of stubbornness. That somewhere underneath the career, I was waiting for permission to come home and do what he'd already decided I was supposed to do." Danny made a sound that wasn't quite a word. "He doesn't know you at all," she said. That was the moment I cried. Not about the resignation letter, not about Karen's office, not about the word overwhelmed. About that. The simple, specific fact that my father had looked at everything I'd built and seen only a resource he hadn't fully secured yet. I cried for about 4 minutes. Then I finished cooking and Danny and I talked about something else. By the end of that first week, something in me had settled into a new position. Not anger. Not grief. Just clarity. The kind that comes when something that was complicated for a long time suddenly isn't. I didn't have to go back. I had never had to go back. The only thing that had kept me doing those Friday evenings wasn't obligation, it was habit, and guilt, and the particular exhaustion of trying to want something your parent wants from you even when you know you don't. I had stopped. And now I was just going to wait and see what that revealed. I didn't have to wait very long. Day 3 after the incident Thursday was when Cole first tried to run payroll on his own. I know this because he called me at 6:47 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave one. The payroll platform I used for Caldwell was through a regional provider, not the big national names, a smaller Ohio-based system that my father had signed up for in 2018 because the monthly cost was lower. I had set up the account. My email address was the account administrator. Multi-factor authentication went to my phone number. Cole had the username, it was the business email, but he had never once logged in himself. The password I'd set was 20 characters because I was also the one who'd set up their cybersecurity practices after a phishing attempt in 2021 scared my father into finally taking it seriously. Cole could not have logged in without me even if he'd wanted to. The 6 technicians who worked for my father got paid every other Friday. The next payday was day 7. Day 4, my father called twice. Once in the morning. Once in the evening. No voicemails. The silence of a man who still believed the other person would flinch first. Day 5, something else happened. Precision Parts Supply, the primary HVAC parts vendor my father used, the account I had managed since 2020, sent an automated notice to the business email that an invoice was 30 days past due. The amount was $4,200. I had always processed their invoices through the vendor portal, which I had also set up and was the sole user of. The notice went to the business email. My father didn't check the business email. He'd set that up and then handed it to me and never looked at it again. The invoice didn't get paid. Precision Parts had a standing policy: accounts 30 days past due went on hold. No new orders fulfilled until the balance cleared. In HVAC contracting, you cannot complete jobs without parts. You cannot bill for jobs you cannot complete. Every day an account is on hold is a job that can't close and an invoice that can't go out. I knew this. I'd been the one who kept it from happening for 4 years. Day 6. My father tried to open QuickBooks. I know this because the system sends the account administrator me a notification when an unusual login attempt is flagged. He'd tried the password he thought was correct 3 times before getting locked out. The lockout notice came to my email at 11:23 in the morning on a Thursday. I read it at lunch. I didn't unlock the account. Day 7 was payday. 6 technicians who had shown up every day that week running service calls, installing units, doing the work the business ran on did not receive their direct deposits. By 9 a.m., Cole had 4 text messages and 2 phone calls from technicians asking where their pay was. My father called me at 9:14 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave one. Day 8, the calls came faster. My father 3 times. Cole twice. An unknown number that I later confirmed was a technician named Marcus who had my number from a time 2 years ago when I'd called him directly to confirm a banking change for his direct deposit. I let them all go. There's a specific sound a phone makes when it keeps ringing and you keep not answering. You learn the length of it. You learn the particular silence after. I became very familiar with both that week. I want to be clear about something. I was not sitting at home watching the clock and savoring this. I was going to work. I was doing my job. I made dinner and called Tara back and went for a run on Saturday morning in the cold like I always did. I was living my regular life. The only thing I wasn't doing was answering my father's calls. That was all it took for his business to start coming apart at the seams. Day 9 was a Tuesday. By that morning, the missed calls had reached 43. I know because I counted them. 43 calls across 9 days. My father, Cole, a technician, and twice from a number I recognized as my Aunt Carol's, which meant Dad had started reaching out to extended family to try to get to me sideways. At 11:52 a.m. on day 9, my father left a voicemail. It was the first one. I've listened to it maybe 30 times since. Not because it gave me satisfaction, it didn't, not exactly, but because of what it revealed about how a certain kind of person sounds when they finally understand the shape of what they've lost. His voice was careful at first. Measured. The voice he used when he was trying to sound reasonable while also making it clear he thought you were being unreasonable. Hey. It's Dad. Listen, I need you to call me back when you get a chance. There's a situation with the business and I need your help with a few things. The guys haven't been paid, the payroll system's locked up and Cole can't get in. I've been trying to reset it but it keeps sending a code to your phone, so. Also, Precision Parts has put the account on hold. I don't have the login for the vendor portal, and there's an invoice they say is outstanding that I can't pull up because I can't get into the accounting system either. A pause. Longer than the rest. I also got a notice from the IRS portal about the upcoming quarterly filing. The 941. I need to submit by April 30th and I don't have the access for the federal tax system. I called the IRS directly, but I couldn't get through the automated system without the PIN, and I don't have that. Another pause. Listen. I know we had a disagreement. I know you're upset. But this is the business. This is people's livelihoods. Marcus and the guys, they haven't been paid. That's not fair to them. I'm asking you to set aside whatever's going on between us and help me fix this. A breath. I'm asking you. Please call me back. I sat in my car in the Meridian parking lot and played it twice. I noticed everything. The way he framed it as a disagreement, not what he did, not a word about the resignation letter, just the disagreement. The way he pivoted immediately to the technicians, to Marcus and the guys, because he knew that would move me faster than anything about himself. The please at the end landed carefully, at the right volume, in the right place. I thought about 24-year-old me setting up the QuickBooks account on a Saturday morning while he watched football in the other room. I thought about filing the 2020 quarterly 941 remotely from my apartment during a pandemic while I was also managing my own company's pandemic payroll crisis. I thought about the $48,000 offer, the word overwhelmed, the resignation letter with my name on it that I hadn't written. I thought about the technicians. I thought about Marcus, who had 3 kids, who showed up at 7 a.m. every day in February to work in the cold. Who hadn't been paid because my father had decided to force a situation that blew up in his face. I called my father back at 12:17 p.m. He picked up on the first ring. He said my name like he wasn't sure I was real. Yeah, I said. It's me. I'm glad you called. His voice was still doing the careful thing, the measured thing. I heard your voicemail, I said. I'm going to say some things and I need you to listen without interrupting. Can you do that? A pause. Okay. What you did with the resignation letter was not a disagreement. I want you to understand what it actually was. You impersonated me to my employer. You submitted a fraudulent resignation on my behalf without my knowledge or consent. You told my supervisor I was emotionally unstable and struggling with my performance. You could have cost me my job. You could have cost me 3 years of professional credibility. That is not a misunderstanding, and it is not something we just move past because the business needs me. Silence. I'm going to help the technicians get paid, I said. Because Marcus and the others haven't done anything wrong and they don't deserve to be caught in this. I'm going to process this payroll cycle, I'm going to clear the precision parts invoice, and I'm going to make sure the 941 gets filed on time. I will do that. I heard him start to say something. I kept going. After that, I'm done. I'm done doing this work for free. I'm done being available every Friday evening. I'm done being the person who holds the logins and files the taxes and manages the vendors and keeps everything running while you tell people at family dinners that I don't care about the family. I've been caring about this family in ways that would have cost you 6 figures to replace on the open market, and you responded by trying to have me fired. The silence on his end was a different quality now. Not the silence of someone waiting to speak. The silence of someone absorbing something they can't immediately argue with. You have 2 options, I said. Option 1, you hire a qualified bookkeeper, a real one, not Phyllis, not me, someone you pay at market rate with a contract, and I'll spend 1 session, 1 hour, handing off the accounts and the documentation so they can take over cleanly. 1 hour. That's what I'll give you for free. And option 2? His voice was quieter now. Option 2 is you don't, and you figure it out yourself. But I want you to know what that means. The QuickBooks file, the payroll system, the vendor portals, the IRS e-file credentials, all of it is built around my access. Rebuilding it without me will take months and probably cost you more than you've spent on anything in the last 4 years. That's not a threat. It's just the truth about how dependent the business has become on something you never valued enough to pay for. He didn't say anything for a moment. I made a mistake, he finally said. It came out stiff, the way an admission does when someone's saying it because there's no other play, not because they mean it from the center. I know, I said. I thought he stopped. Started again. I thought if you didn't have the other job, you'd see that this was the right thing. Dad. I kept my voice even. I am the right thing for my own life. Not for yours. You don't get to make that decision. A long pause. So you'll help with the payroll, he said. Not a question. I'll log in tonight and process the cycle. Marcus and everyone else will have their deposits by Thursday morning. And precision parts. I'll clear the invoice from the vendor portal and set up autopay so it doesn't happen again. Whoever you hire can take it over from there. He was quiet again. I could hear him breathing. What about the 941, he said. The quarterly. I'll file it. This one. That's the last one. Another silence. This one had a different texture, not strategic, not calculating. Just tired. Maybe for the first time in this conversation, actually tired. I didn't think, he said slowly, about all the pieces. I know, I said. That's the problem. I didn't say it cruelly. I didn't need to. It was just the plainest sentence in the conversation. He'd never once had to think about the pieces. Because I had been thinking about them for 4 years, quietly, on Friday evenings, without being asked and without being thanked and without being paid. He had built a dependency so thorough that he'd stopped being able to see it. It had become invisible the way necessary things do when someone else is carrying them. And then he'd tried to take the one thing I had that was entirely mine, my career, my trajectory, the life I'd built without him, and he'd done it without a single moment of understanding what he was actually touching. I'll send you a list of qualified bookkeepers in the area, I said. People who do small business accounting. Any one of them can take this on. Okay, he said. There was nothing else in that word. No argument. No pivot to what I owed him or what he'd sacrificed or what the family needed. Just okay. I'll process payroll tonight, I said. The guys will be paid Thursday. Thank you, he said. I almost said you're welcome. I stopped myself. Take care of yourself, Dad. I hung up. I sat in the parking lot for a while after that. Not 20 minutes like I once had, crying in a driveway. Just a few minutes. Watching the February sky go flat and gray over the office building. I thought about the voicemail. The pleas at the end of it. The specific helplessness in his voice when he said he couldn't get through the IRS automated system without the PIN. A PIN I had set. A system I had accessed on his behalf for 6 years, invisibly, without ceremony. I thought about what it must have felt like to reach for something that had always been there and find nothing. I thought about how long I had been that thing for him. And how quietly, completely, it had finally stopped. That night, I logged into the payroll system for the last time. I processed the cycle. I cleared the precision parts invoice. I documented everything in a handoff folder, organized, labeled, thorough. The way I did everything. Because that's who I was. Not because of him. In spite of him. By Thursday morning, 6 technicians had their direct deposits. I never logged in again. 3 weeks after that phone call, I got an email from my father. Not a call. An email. Which told me something had shifted even in the small mechanics of how he reached for me. He'd hired a bookkeeper. Her name was Janet Osei. She had 12 years of experience in small business accounting, a QuickBooks Pro Advisor certification, and a rate of $32 an hour. He'd found her through one of the names on the list I sent him. He asked if I'd be willing to do the handoff session I'd promised. 1 hour. I said yes. We met at the business office on a Saturday morning in early March. My father was there, quieter than I'd ever seen him in a professional setting. Janet was sharp and organized and asked exactly the right questions. I walked her through the chart of accounts, the payroll structure, the vendor portals, the IRS e-file credentials. I handed over every login and every piece of documentation I'd built over 4 years. It took 53 minutes. My father walked me to my car after. He looked like he wanted to say something that he hadn't figured out how to say yet. I waited. I didn't understand. He finally said, "How much of it was you?" I nodded. "I do now." It wasn't an apology. Not a real one, not the kind that names what it's apologizing for and means it in the bones. But it was the most honest thing he'd said to me in years. So I took it for what it was and left it at that. I drove home with the windows down even though it was still cold. 41 degrees and Ohio gray outside, and I had the windows down because I needed the air. I remember thinking, that's the last Saturday morning I will ever spend doing something I didn't choose. It felt like the first day of something, not the end of something. My relationship with my father is not repaired. I want to be honest about that, because these stories sometimes get wrapped up in ways that aren't true to what healing actually looks like, which is slow and uneven, and sometimes just a permanent renegotiation of terms. We talk occasionally now. Phone calls that are shorter than they used to be and more honest than they ever were. He asks about work. I tell him enough. He doesn't mention the business unless I ask. I don't ask often. Cole told me at Easter that Janet had the books in better shape than they'd been in years. He said it like a compliment. I think he meant it as one. I let it land as one. What I miss, and I do miss something, I'd be lying if I said otherwise, is the version of my father I used to believe existed when I was younger. The one who would eventually recognize what I'd given and say thank you and mean it without needing 43 missed calls to get there. I mourned that version quietly, the way you mourn something that was never quite real. You grieve the idea of it. Then you set it down. At Meridian, Lee put me forward for a position on the compliance restructuring team in April. It's a lateral move in title but a significant one in scope, a project that will touch every department, with visibility at the executive level. She told me in the meeting that she'd been thinking about recommending me since before everything happened. That what I'd handled, the way I'd walked into her office, calm and clear, and asked to have the record corrected, had confirmed something she already believed about me. I start in May. My Friday evenings are mine now. All of them. I use them differently than I thought I would. I assumed I'd feel the absence, the way you feel a tooth that's been pulled. But mostly I just feel the space where the obligation used to be, and in that space I've been doing things I'd kept putting off for 4 years. I signed up for a pottery class that I'm genuinely terrible at. I've been cooking real dinners on weeknights instead of reheating whatever I had on Sunday. I started running again, not the anxious kind of running you do when you're carrying too much, but the kind where you go slow and look at things. The voicemail is still on my phone. I haven't deleted it. Not because I want to hold it over him. I don't need to. But because there are days, ordinary days, good days, even when a familiar guilt starts to whisper that maybe I was too harsh, that maybe family requires more sacrifice than I gave it, that maybe I should have just said yes. On those days I play the first 20 seconds. And then I remember exactly what I was protecting. Here's what I know now that I didn't fully believe then: the people who take the most from you are usually the ones who understand your value the least. Not because they're evil. Because they've never had to reckon with it. They've never had to imagine what disappears when you stop being available. And so they don't nod until the payroll doesn't run and the vendors don't ship and the IRS form sits unfiled and the phone rings 43 times into silence. You don't have to set it all on fire to be free. You just have to stop picking it up. Stop logging in on Friday evenings. Stop answering calls that only come when something is needed. Stop making yourself small enough to fit inside someone else's plan for your life. Your career is yours. Your Friday evenings are yours. Your name is yours. Nobody gets to resign you from your own life. Not even your father. If you watched this far, you already know this story hit different. If you want more stories like this one, real ones, the kind people are afraid to tell, they're on your screen right now. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you there.